I'm at St James's Church here in Mayfair, London, to talk to Reverend Lucy Winkett. Reverend Lucy was the first ordained woman priest at St Paul's and is the rector at St James's Church. Besides being a super priest, she is a broadcaster, she is a writer, but above all, she's a spiritual philosopher. I look forward to talking to Reverend Lucy for our One World program. Thank you, Lucy, for allowing me to speak to you.
Not at all,
on
it's a pleasure.
Our One World program. You know, this morning I was just thinking, should I start with Buddha or should I start with Jesus? Mm-hmm. But I think you know what I'm going to start with. Jesus, in the context of our world, Jesus said, I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart. I have overcome the world. Mm. Now, in view of what is happening in this world, should we be optimistic? Should we take heart?
That's a great question. I think, from the point of view of a Christian, Christianity, through the life, death and resurrection of Jesus, takes the mess and the violence and the dissonance of the world very seriously. So I think for me that's one of the reasons I'm a Christian, because it seems if you put on, as you might say, Christian spectacles, you see realistically the selfishness and cruelty of which everyone is capable. At the same time, you also see the potential for that to be redeemed and forgiven and for peace to come. So Jesus of Nazareth, when he's talking like that, and he says lots of quite contradictory things about the world and how he relates to the world and how we should relate to the world, he's not completely coherent about that, which I really like. Essentially, how he lives, how he dies, and the fact that his disciples saw him after his death, it's that story which gives us a kind of hope and a template, actually, because then the pattern of living is life, death, life. So death is only ever the middle part of life, death, life.
Good. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But I think from what I understand, your journey may have begun with music. And does music sort of give you a divine connection of some type? Does it take you somewhere else where people don't normally go?
Yeah,
is that right?
I think music is itself a language of the human spirit. So I think it has a language of its own, doesn't need words. So you can have music with words, of course, singers sing words, but you don't need words for it to be expressive of who we are and what we hope for. And so music, yes, music is a language, and it can express, it can express a lament for the suffering of the world in a way that probably words can't. And I think that music is, we've done something odd with music in the West anyway. In the West, we've made it into a skill that people have or don't have, and they feel like they're good at it or they're not good at it, or I can sing or I can't sing. I think all that is total nonsense. And one of the kind of defining characteristics of people is that we make noise and music that doesn't have any kind of utilitarian purpose. So birds sing to establish their territory or to find a mate or whatever. Human beings sing for sometimes to do that, but for the sheer enjoyment of it. So I think it's fabulously useless music, and as such is something that's expressive of kind of joy and sadness and grief and delight in a way that probably words struggle to express.
But what does it do to you when you're, for example, singing? It must take you somewhere else.
Yeah.
Where does it take you?
I mean, I trained as a professional singer, so there's a kind of bit of skill making in there, which means that I probably think of it a little bit differently now than I used to. And what I think of it now is that but I think this again is that it's an amazing way to live. I've used this in life generally. So if I'm learning a song, so there's a really beautiful song cycle by Gustav Mahler called Kindertotenlied, and it's about the death of a child. So it's a very sad song cycle. And you, as a singer, I think you practice that song until you can't sing it anymore.
Yes.
Until you're in it to the extent that you can't do it anymore. You then go through that, and then you practice it and learn it, and then you bring it back so that you can sing it for other people. You never go back there because you have to sing it, but you take them there.
I understand.
So I think there's some kind of remembering in singing, which is a reconstituting of a memory that is too distressing to sing, but you can sing it, and in singing that you then give permission for other people to be able to express that grief or joy or whatever it might be. So for me it's unparalleled way of communicating the deepest truths of the human condition.
I think that's beautifully put, very beautifully put. Now, I think as sounds are important, and we talk a little bit about your beautiful book, actually, a lovely book you've written. So is silence. And I think one of my favorite people, Mother Teresa, said, we need to find God, and he cannot be found in noise and restlessness. God is a friend of silence. We need silence to be able to touch souls. I remember even Andrea Bocelli telling me that, by the way, escaping from even music.
Absolutely.
So where does silence fit into your life and generally in people's life? How important is silence?
I think we're afraid of silence again I live in the centre of a big city, in the centre of London, and it's noisy all the time, all night, all day. And I sometimes wonder why we as human beings have created that environment, because we've made this environment. And I think that we are afraid of silence. I'll say a little bit more about silence itself, but I think where I start is that we're generally afraid of silence, because in silence, everything that you think you have sorted out, put in a drawer, dealt with, comes back. So you have to be quite courageous to spend time in silence, because everything kind of up it all comes again. And so we're afraid of it. And sometimes I think that, I think of this sometimes in a city, it's a bit like we're quite, it's a primitive instinct. We're in the middle of a forest, it's dark. What we're going to do is light a fire and bang dustbin lids together to kind of make sure that the beasts stay out and everyone stays away, and we've got light and noise, and that's what makes us feel safe. But actually, the deepest relationship with God is in darkness and silence. So we're avoiding it. Why are we avoiding it? I think because we're afraid of our own death.
Our death?
Our death. So I think silence reminds us of the great silence that is to come.
I didn't think of it that way. But
so I think we resist it, and we're resisting kind of peace and quiet and silence, because ultimately, underneath all the other things we're afraid of, we're afraid of dying. So becoming at peace with your own death means that you can tolerate a greater silence in life.
It's a different angle to what I thought you might say.
Okay.
I mean, Buddha said, of course, peace lies within, do not seek it without.
Right.
And in a paradoxical way, if you can overcome your fears of silence, then you actually move into peace. And I think that's the hurdle people are not prepared to cross.
Yes.
Actually, you're right. They have to cross that hurdle to face one's own self and the truth. So, thank you. Thank you for that. Now, just on a lighter note, I was reading that you had a rock band. Before I ask you to comment, I think it's a problem with many people, I used to have a band called the Tax Pistols, which because I'm an accountant, but the Ordained was your.
Yes.
I think it's going to come and haunt you all your life.
Very good.
Was that prophetic?
We had real fun in that band. We were all at college training to be
I've been there.
priests.
We were
already training.
Okay.
We were already but it was we called it the Ordained, a little bit like your
Tax
Pistols. There was a band called the Damned. And we thought we'd be funny and call ourselves the Ordained.
Very good.
As opposed to the Damned. So we were trying to play on words as well. But it was really fun, and I mean it was actually, we wrote some of our own songs, and but we did a lot of covers, and I can't say that we were really fantastic as a band, but what was great was that we would just go to a pub and do an open mic night and stand in the corner of the pub, and sometimes we would one of our band called Jeff, he died very sadly a couple of years ago. But he used to kind of run a competition with the people in the pub. He did this a few times. If they could guess what our job was. Nobody guessed vicar. Nobody guessed priest or vicar. And he's a Methodist minister.
Although the
Ordained, yes, exactly. Might have given it away. But they just thought that was no way would vicars go anyway. So that was always really fun. And they usually thought we were kind of public sector workers. I think we probably looked like that, but we were police officers or something like that. It was good fun.
Now, turning to religion.
Yes.
Was Christianity an accident of or design of your birth? Good question.
Yes. I think it has to be an accident, actually. But I don't think that precludes design. So I don't think they're opposites.
I was just trying to think which precedes what.
I don't think they're opposite.
Yeah.
I don't think they're opposites.
Okay, could be both.
Yeah, but I think, I mean, I was born in Salisbury in Wiltshire, quite close to Stonehenge, big pagan,
hippie
centre. But obviously I've been born in the UK and brought up as a kind of nominal Christian, and so I guess in that sense, I mean, what I would describe is that, in kind of religious language or in Christian language, we talk about calling and vocation. Yes. So we're kind of called out of ourselves, or called to be ourselves. And I think I find myself most fully to be myself as a Christian. So that I would link with Jesus's phrase, which he said, "I've come that they may have life in all its abundance." So if you find abundant life in Christianity, then you're a Christian.
No, the question about design was really the calling part.
Yes,
whether you're destined to be this. But
well, I think again, I don't.
You don't deny that, I don't think.
I certainly don't deny. No, I don't deny that at all. But I don't think. I'm not certain that I really believe that there is a kind of blueprint set out for me and for everybody else, in terms of what God determines for us. I think in a Christian understanding of how we relate to God, because of the incarnation, because God became human, then God is intimately involved and understands the kind of vagaries and complexities and mixed motives of what it's like to be a human being. So, and that is then taken back into God. So that's a kind of permanent presence in the Godhead. So I think what I would take from that theological point is that I make my own decisions. At the same time, God will. Somebody said to me once, this is a really good point actually, somebody said to me once, God is a bit like sat-nav in a car. So God kind of says, turn left at the next, whatever, and you think, no, I know a better way than that, so off you go. And then when you've ended up in the middle of a field because you haven't done what the sat-nav's told you, that God simply recalculate. So God comes to where you are and then, perhaps shepherds you gently back to where, in the end, you're going to be.
Yeah.
But I don't think we know that this side of death.
No, I don't think, I'm not saying that you do, but I think there's a broad design in how you exploit that road, the motorway, if you like.
Right.
It depends upon you.
Yes.
But then generally, I believe anyway.
Yes,
But,
yes.
But perhaps we're on the same road.
Yes,
if you
absolutely,
like.
absolutely.
Now, I mean, are religious people better people, you think?
No, definitely not. Definitely not.
It's the wrong answer.
No, definitely not. I think we know our need of God.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps we know our need more deeply. I don't know. But I don't think we are intrinsically better people. I don't know actually that we become better people, but I think we're people who practice a religion. I mean, I would want to say it's the most beautiful invitation of the way of life. With a spiritual practice is a beautiful way to live, and a very fulfilling way to live. So I would advocate it. I would want to kind of encourage people to do it. At the same time, I think it's quite often born of you knowing your deep need of God. So if you think you don't need God, then you don't need religion. So you carry on. My feeling is that life is less rich, less fulfilled. But that person might say to me, "Well, that's nonsense." I would be happy to have that conversation. But for me, it's absolutely all about an invitation to live the life that you're called to live, and you spend a lifetime discovering what that is, and it's a huge. I think it's a huge adventure.
But you actually said spirituality and then you said religion. But God and religion does not necessarily go together. You could believe in God and not have a religious sort of...
Yes, of course.
Yes.
And I think that the word spirituality has been very debased in our language and our culture.
I want to talk to you much more about that.
Good.
It's the real reason I'm here.
Good.
But before that, I mean, your own experience as a woman in church has been an interesting journey.
Yes.
I was actually...
There's one word for it.
No, yes. Well, I don't know what else I could say, but having said that, I was just so impressed reading the Times on the aeroplane on Monday, and it says stained glass ceiling is broken by women clergy.
Yes.
Now, you started, I think, as probably the first priest.
I was one of the one of the generation of first women priests.
Certainly the first priest at St. Paul's.
Absolutely.
And that was 20 years ago?
Yes, I was ordained 23 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, looking at this headline, you must feel something because, and actually even, I know that you went through a lot of difficulty, I know that.
Sure,
but was your struggle your making actually? And of course the making of what has happened. I'd like to know about that.
It's a very, I mean, I never quite know what to say about it. It's a very formative experience to be part of a change, and to be part of a change that is controversial. It's you never know how it's going to feel and how that's going to work out for you. And for a while, yes, I mean, there were many of us involved with this. It was a whole generation of women and men, allies, but the women were kind of in the furnace, I suppose, of it. And for a short time, a year or two, I know that for me it was, I became a bit of a public face of the cause and the change and the opposition. It kind of drew out some quite sharp opposition to me personally. And I think looking back on it now, I can see that if people feel that their church and therefore their faith is somehow imperiled, and it felt perilous to them. I can't understand why I represented peril to them,
threat.
But I did. Then of course they felt and said some pretty sharp things. And I can see that now because I can see the whole. And I suppose I'm just a bit older, so I understand that that's kind of what happens when
change is necessary.
Exactly. And when people feel that they feel, imperiled is the only word I can think of for it. So I get it. At the time, it was incredibly distressing, incredibly distressing. And, the old adage, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I suppose I am pretty strong.
The role of women is in a sense, disappointing in the Church of England. I mean, I was thinking about my favourite saint, Saint Mother Mary.
Okay.
I mean, she is revered by the Catholics. Yeah. She is the only person in the Quran who has a complete verse devoted to her.
Absolutely.
She's mentioned 70 times in the Quran.
Yes.
My question really is this, that as a role model, how does she work for you?
Yeah, very strongly. And I mean, I love Mary, the Mother of Christ, because...
So do I.
Because, well, for many reasons, but one of the reasons is because she does provide this link between Judaism, Christianity and Islam. So she's a young Jewish girl and she gives birth to Jesus, who is our prophet and our saviour.
Yes.
And she, as you say, she has a surah named after her in the Quran. So I feel that she is a way of us Abrahamic religions talking to each other in a peaceful and creative way. I think from within Christianity, Mary is an extraordinary character, really, in the sense that she simply says yes to this vocation that she doesn't understand. And there's that beautiful story of a conversation between the angel Gabriel and Mary, and angel simply means messenger, and in the Orthodox tradition this happens at a well. So and I've been to the well in Nazareth, where this is all said to have taken place. And a well in the Hebrew tradition is a place where people fall in love. Jacob fell in love with Rachel at a well, and so it's a place of encounters. It's a mystical place. It's a place, obviously, where it's it's born deep into the earth for life-giving water to come. And if Mary received this vocation at a well from a strange messenger, and she simply said yes to this life which was going to, be extraordinary, that's amazing. And I think that's a vocation for men and women to discern, to be attentive to where is the encounter at the well that you encounter in your everyday life. And when the invitation comes, just say yes. Just say yes. That's an extraordinary thing for Mary, as far as...
There is this situation of apparitions over time of Mother Mary. What is your thinking on that?
I think that, at the other end of Jesus' life, the other thing to say about Mary is that, so she was courageous at the beginning by saying yes. She's also courageous at the end because she stays at the foot of the cross.
Absolutely.
And all the blokes run away. That's true. Am I allowed to say that?
Yes, that is exactly what
they
happened.
all run away, apart from John. But they mostly
Mary Magdalene.
Mary Magdalene, exactly. So there are a couple who stay, but mostly they run away and they make a complete hash of it all.
Yes, they do.
So she really stays.
It's almost comical. Sorry, I'm going.
No, I know. Yeah. But she stays, and I think there's something also about a vocation to stay sometimes in a situation that is. I mean, obviously that situation is catastrophic, and you can't imagine what that's like. But to stay in difficult situations sometimes is also a vocation that Mary can help us with and teach us with. Okay. So there's this kind of delight at the beginning to say yes to that invitation to live, but also to stay in very complex and difficult situations. Very and I think that her story and her humanity, as well as her, as you're saying, kind of her greater meaning, I suppose, I think people find a connection with her that sometimes they find it difficult to find a connection with a slightly amorphous, distant God.
Very good.
And I feel that that's that's a beautiful thing. So I believe people when I believe them. I believe what they tell me.
Is it real?
If they have seen Mary, I believe them.
So
I haven't seen Mary, so it's not real to me.
You'll have to go to Ephesus.
Maybe I should.
Now, I'd like to talk a little bit about your book, which I had to speed read it, by the way.
Well, it's quite short, so you're all right.
So I was okay.
It's not too big.
And I do not profess to have read every word of it,
No.
but the first thing that strikes me, the book is Our Sound is Our Wound.
Yes.
I found it a little bit sad, yet piercing almost. You know, when you talk about the sounds of lament, you talk about the sound of the angels, and actually the sadness of music, and so on. So it's a beautiful journey of sounds, Christianity, and life, actually, all coming together. But tell me a little bit about the front cover, because that in itself speaks a lot. What does it say?
mean, gosh, it's an amazing picture, isn't it?
Yeah.
Edvard Munch,
Yes,
the screen. And I went to Oslo to see the picture in reality. So I've always really loved it. And I think for me, it says something about what it's like to be a listener in the world. So for me, the primary task of a human being is to listen. And then we can speak, and then we can sing, and then we can react. But to learn to listen is a costly journey, because you hear some amazingly inspiring things, but also if you've turned your ears on, you can't turn them off. So you hear also the cruelty and the dissonance. So this picture, to me, the contours, you know, that figure who's a kind of androgynous figure, and there's two people just in the background, probably unconnected, but the whole world is kind of kind of vortex of sound for that figure.
Now, I know we don't have that much time, but I did want to pick up a couple of things, if I may,
sure.
because to me they struck a chord. The first one really is in the context of Jesus on the cross.
Yes.
You say, we learn that when we find our own true voice and use it, we set ourselves and others free. Now, that's quite profound. What do you mean by that? Because in the sense of just reading the words, it doesn't say what I think you want to say.
Yeah. In the context of Jesus on the cross, I think my learning from that is that for Christians, of course, this is God crucified. So Jesus is the Son of God, but it's God being crucified. So what I learned from Jesus speaking at all on the cross is that it is our calling to speak from the midst of our suffering. So even at the bleakest moments, it is asked of us that we utter, that we speak, that we express this, whatever it is.
Yes.
And that doesn't have to be just distress, but for that particular learning, I think it is. So to speak of the knowledge of our own pain is partly to discover our own true voice. And then when we've discovered our own true voice, we speak that out, others will know they're not alone. So I think that in inviting others into that conversation, there's a freedom in that. So it's really to relieve our loneliness. We are all alone, but we don't have to be lonely. To find a deeper connection with others,
You need to share this.
You need to be able to speak from the centre of your pain. But I don't think that's not a depressing thing. Do you know what I mean?
No.
I'm not. It's not a kind of low spirited thing.
I think you're saying speak from the heart, really, at all times.
Yes.
Both joy and sorrow.
To try,
Yeah.
absolutely,
Yeah.
yes, and that you saying that Jesus says, "My God, why have you forsaken me? Why have you left? Why have you abandoned me?"
He hasn't.
And for many people, that's amazingly comforting. And it shouldn't be. It's called the cry of dereliction.
No,
Do you know what I mean? But
the paradox.
And in that paradox of expressing that utter desolation, for us reading that in Scripture, there's a comfort in it. And who knows how that mechanism works, but it is. So I feel less alone and I'm set free by it.
Very good. One more.
Yeah, of course.
It's again about sound,
Yeah.
and you say the first sound of resurrection of Christ is a woman's named Mary. This tender conversation between Jesus and Mary Magdalene.
Yes.
And then you say a few things. She is told to go and teach her brothers the greatest truth about God. What is that truth?
That death is not the end. I spoke before about our fear of death. I think because we are egotistical creatures and we've got our own parameters. We look at our bodies and we think, I'm it, I'm acting in the world. We can't imagine us not being here. So we're afraid of that kind of nihilism. And I think that I sometimes... So when I was talking about this, the kind of energy of resurrection, I was also challenging a bit the kind of Christian language about resurrection, which is often quite triumphalist. And, it's a bit like, I imagine kind of Tarzan beating his chest saying, we've won. And I can't bear all of that. It's not that. So that's why I wanted to say that the moment that the first sound of resurrection is a woman's name, very tenderly spoken in an early morning garden. Because if I'm imagining what death is like, this side of death, I don't know. All I observe from a person is that they become still, their voice ceases, and they're not there anymore. So that this side of death, that's all I know. Can I imagine that for myself? I have to. In terms of the resurrection, I think what I sometimes feel is that if I imagine myself in the womb, I'm about to be born. I don't breathe air yet. I don't stand yet. I can't imagine what life is like in the world. But from the womb, I can hear intimations of this new world that I'm about to go into. I can hear voices. I can hear music. I can sense that change is coming, and the biological processes will turn me so that my head is ready, to come out into the world.
Position yourself.
But I cannot imagine what that world is going to be like, and it's a different element. Even I will breathe air for the first time. I think death is a bit like that. I'm in a womb now, and I cannot imagine what the next stage is like. I hear intimations of it. I don't know what my body will be like. I don't even know if I won't have one. I mean, I'm sure I won't have one.
You don't know these things?
No. But there's a kind of, I believe I will be me somehow, changed. And so that's a very delicate process. It's not a kind of triumphalist, trumpets and armies and kings and conquerors, I leave all that behind. It's much more like being born. So it's a perilous journey, my dying, and I think my task as a person alive to a spiritual is the same task as a child who will be slowly turned ready to come out. So my head will gradually I will gradually be turned to the position where I can make that journey into the next life.
Very beautifully put. So does eternal life, in the sense you say it, could stretch to reincarnation?
Again,
or you close that door in?
I would never close any door.
No.
Never close any door. No. But I have no experience of that.
Yes.
So as far as I can say that I don't believe it, I don't believe in it. But that, but that's
doesn't.
I'm respectful of people who do, but for me that doesn't make it doesn't make sense.
Now, Dr. Christopher Finlay was reviewing your book, and I really like what he said. I don't know him as a person.
What he said.
Well, he said actually, the study of spirituality can become an activity akin to exploring the phenomena of wine tasting without actually tasting the wine.
Right. Good.
Now, he's talking about spirituality,
Yes,
and he's talking about. But let me ask you this: have you tasted this wine? Of spirituality?
Yes, yeah. I mean, I think I have. I think I have.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a little bit, and it's a little bit similar to what I was saying before about, you know, we make a mistake if we think that faith and religion and spirituality and all those things are quite distinct. I could spend hours talking about any of those things, but we make a mistake if all of those things are primarily up here in a list of things that we believe about the world. I think that it has, you know, spirituality is a lot more earthy than we think it is. It's about actual living. And one of the things that I think we've done, again, in the West with spirituality, is that we've made it into a kind of smorgasbord of things that you like. So there isn't a, so it can be, if you're not careful, a kind of self.
Yes.
It's an unchallengeable way of looking at the world for you. Nobody can challenge you on it because it's you just say, well, that's what I
That's
think.
the truth.
That's mine. You know? And I suppose for me then, spirituality is a vital component of religious life. But that's why I'm still committed to religion, which is less fashionable now. But I am still committed to religion because in religion you are confronted with the other a lot. And to build community is incredibly hard. So even within a Christian community, there's lots of disagreement, and you know, people will say, you know, we were talking before, when people feel that their faith is in peril, they will say some pretty tough things. So I feel that there's something grounded, you know, that your life is with your neighbour, and you know, Jesus said, "Love your neighbour as yourself." I mean, that you spend a lifetime learning to do that. That's incredibly hard. But to love yourself, you know, is just as difficult as to love your neighbour. And he said both of those things. So I think it's a mild note of caution, but it is a note of caution if we're very caught up with a sense of being spiritual by yourself is all that there is, or that's all that could be. I think you're missing out on a lot of challenge, but you're missing out on a lot of richness. I think what I'm saying is that private spiritual experience is given meaning when it's kind of put into question by the reality of God. So God is not just a sum of the parts of the things that I've felt about God. God is, for me, a reality in whose presence I have the potential to be dismantled. And Rowan Williams, former Archbishop of Canterbury, talks about everything being called into question, or everything being put into question. And that doesn't mean to say that you're going to be destroyed. If you trust that God, then there's nothing that is not available to God from you. And that's, I mean, it's an incredibly challenging way to live, because you're always saying that what you say is provisional, but you also stake your life on it. So you say, everything is at stake for me, and still I can't tell you that this is the absolute truth that is irrefutable for all time. Who can say that? Who can know that? So that, but for me, that doesn't mean to say that that's any less of a faith. It's a deep and trusting faith that actually I'm giving all my life and energy to, and wouldn't do anything else.
How passionate way of putting it, really. I think, it's time is up for our program, but I'd like to conclude by really saying something from your book again.
Please, yeah.
And you quote from Corinthians 13:1. You say, "If I speak in the tongues of mortals and of angels, but do not have love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal." Reverend Lucy Winkett, you have spoken with love and kindness. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.